Okay. Um, yeah, appreciate everybody being on. We're excited to present. This is an asset we've owned for a little over a year. My name is Dustin Miles with Momentum Multifamily and partner Hayden Harrington. So I'm excited to present this today. So this is the Henry Ranchstone. This is in Houston, kind of northwest Houston. And so, anyways, we'll go ahead and jump in. So kind of before we dig into the asset and all that, we'll kind of look at, and there's a purpose behind this. So we have a portfolio in Houston, a little over 1,800 units. These are some of the assets that we have. We treat the assets like a franchise. So we want everything the same. We want same systems, same processes, same vendors, same colors as you can see here, and same branding. So our brand in Houston is the Henry. So we have 8 Henrys around Houston. We're actually looking at getting putting up a billboard, which is kind of fun, just because we like to cluster assets together, and so it kind of is makes sense, and we can just from a scalability perspective makes sense. We can bring down cost and all that too. So that we have the Henry Rosenberg, the Henry Jones Road here. Um, the Henry Jones Road is right down the street from the asset that we'll be talking about today. And then we have the Henry at Woodland Hills, the Henry at Lake Houston. So you're kind of seeing a theme. A lot of them look the same, even though they're different builders. And then we have the Henry at Ranchstone, which we'll be diving in today, and then the Henry at New Forest, which we just acquired about 2 months ago. That paint looks completely different. But what's kind of neat, if you look at the Henry at New Forest, the asset behind there is we actually own that asset too. They share a fence line, which is really cool. And then yeah, Hayden, if you want to kind of kick us off here, and then we'll go from there.
Sure, sounds good. So yeah, just taking it back to what did we like when we were originally looking at this deal? One thing that we liked is that consistent ownership. And so the previous owner had owned it for 30 years, essentially since it was built. And we really like that when we're looking at new opportunities because then everything's consistent. All of your fixtures, all of your appliances on the interiors are all the same. Your finish outs are the same. Anytime you have a deal that's been traded, every couple of years, it's had, a half dozen different ownership groups. It's had that, that means it's had a half dozen different value add programs through it. And it just makes things really, really complicated. You end up with a bunch of different finish outs on your interiors and managing that, especially if the plan is to upgrade a portion, if not all, becomes very, very complicated very fast. So we really liked the original ownership of 30 years. That also shows that the previous owner enjoyed the property. If it was a tougher deal and they didn't like owning it, they would have sold it much earlier. So it shows that they enjoyed owning the deal and really we really like consistency across the board. On top of that, they hadn't touched upgrading the interiors. They would replace as needed, but they never actually went through and did interior upgrade programs. So we really like that. It's a blank slate for us to come in and then upgrade those units to compete with the higher priced properties in the area. Little deferred maintenance. So, like I said, they had owned it for so long. They took good care of it. They just never really upgraded it. So everything was in really good shape, and it was just a great starting point to take over from. On top of that, it's a good unit count. 148 units is a good unit count. That's kind of the minimum that we look for because just from a staffing perspective, it gets tricky if you're under that kind of 150 unit mark. So you can staff it effectively and then, like Dustin said, we own just down the street, which we really like that. We like to cluster our assets so that we can leverage our resources in the area. And then on top of that, it's got, it's a growing area. There's great schools, close proximity to employers and retail. This is really close to the Beltway. Um, and that makes getting around the city really easy. It's at the intersection of Jones Road and West Road, for anybody that knows Houston, on the northwest side of town. And then it had a lot of character, actually. You can kind of see there in the picture. It's got these bay windows on the left there. You can see the bay windows that are in the primary bedrooms, which is really nice. And then it's got these kind of brownstone-esque, like East Coast style stairways to some units that have a townhome feel. So that's really unique. You don't see that a whole lot. It's got Spanish tile on the steps. So really, really cool detail that you don't see in a lot of apartments, especially new builds nowadays.
Awesome. And then one thing I wanted to mention, I can't remember if you mentioned this or not. It's just kind of a neat little fact too, is the fact that so there's some really long-term residents at this asset. In fact, there's one that has lived there since the property was built, more than 30 years ago, which is really cool. And I think that just again to Hayden's point. Um, there's a lot of options. Why would someone live there for that long unless this was home for them. This was a quality, good, safe place, for them to live. We did look at their lease. I think they've moved once within the asset, so they weren't in the original unit. But anyways, just super cool. And there were some other residents that had lived there a long time too. Anyways, just wanted to point that out. I think it's fun. And then, like Hayden mentioned, this is just right down the road, from another asset that we own. And so we're able to, share some staff and share some other expenses, between the two. We're zoned to really good schools, which is, it's a huge driver, especially, for, people who have families and kids and all that. And then because they'd owned it for a long time. They didn't have to absolutely max out everything as far as rents and all that. And so, they'd gotten, probably a little comfortable and all that too. And these guys were not, they're not multifamily. They own some multifamily, but their focus was industrial. So that was their expertise. Why they bought this, I don't know 100%, but I think they only owned I think they owned like two assets or maybe three in all of Texas. And so they just had this asset, and I assume they own some industrial around here somewhere. But anyways, they didn't have to because they weren't buying and then having to, push rents and all that every few years. And so, I think they refinanced once or twice, kind of, during their tenure, but they didn't have to really push rents. There's an HEB just right around the corner. I was kind of kid around that Hayden could probably throw a baseball and hit the HEB, so it's really close by, just around the corner. It's a lot of traffic, great access to freeways and all that. So it's just a really good part of town. And then just from a multifamily perspective, obviously the area is huge and all that, but they're not building a lot of assets right near this asset because it's a little more established area, and so we don't have to worry about getting beat up by the asset that's being built down the street that's in lease up, and they're offering a month off or more.
And then here's just an overview of the different submarkets in Houston. So we look at this a lot, not just in terms of rents, which this is what it's showing, but also in terms of supply, demand, concessions, and so forth across the board. But this is kind of a good visual of just generally submarkets that we look for when we're looking to acquire a deal. So the dashed green line is the average for Houston, and we really like to stay at or above that dashed line there. And then you can see where the Cypress area stands up against kind of the average submarkets in Houston. So you're definitely on the higher end. And one thing that we liked about that this deal specifically is, the average effective rents in Cyprus are around that $1,500 mark. But when we took over this asset, the average effective rents were mid 1200s. So obviously, we really like that. We never like to own the highest rents on the block just because your ceiling is much more of an unknown, and that's the riskiest place to be. So we like to have kind of a proven path to where we can push those rents. And not only the immediate comps in the submarket supported that, but also, in the broader submarket of Cyprus as well. So that's just kind of a general rule of thumb for, how we look at assets and the types of submarkets that we really like to be in. When you start to drill into each of these submarkets, like we own in Humble and the Rosenberg area, and you can see each of those are at or above that line. We really like Katy, the Woodlands, those sorts of areas, Spring and Tomball, Friendswood. Those are all great submarkets. Sugarland, experiencing a ton of growth. These are the suburban markets around Houston. I'm from Houston. I grew up in the Woodlands on the north side here and have seen it firsthand. So that's really where we want to be. That's where people are moving. It's got great schools out there and in the path of progress. So, identifying those submarkets that you want to be in, and then also those that you don't want to be in. Those areas that you want to stay away from is super important too, because you'll get a deal in your inbox that may look attractive from a basis perspective, but operating those assets in tougher parts of town is tough sometimes, and so you definitely got to be prepared for what you're getting into and fit the business plan to the area.
We're digging into the asset a little bit here. Our big thing is instead of just showing you, obviously, we have it's a really good case study, and we have some great numbers and all that. But also, for us, it's really important to show you not just the rosy picture and all that, but like there's always bumps in the road, or there's hurdles and challenges and all that. We're just, dealing with a lot of people. These are big complexes. There's a lot going on. And we've done a lot of these deals. I know for me, this was, this deal in particular was deal number 17 for me, but even you can do all your homework, blah 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 blah, and stuff, still kind of pops up. And then, one thing in particular that, I mean, you can, uh, you know, whenever we're purchasing it, whenever we're touring it, and we have our construction crew, looking at stuff kind of, beforehand and all that, but you can't see that, hey, the chimney surrounds need to be changed out. Like, we didn't know that until we kind of dug in. It was our budget was, we always have a lot of contingency, just because stuff does pop up and all that. So it wasn't a big deal. But it was a change order, and it was, a $36,000 change order, and we're having to, we replaced the surrounds, and now they look great, and now they're, no worries. But it's just, stuff like that, pops up, routinely. And then on the plumbing side, the plumbing right under the sink, was, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's a different type of PVC that's a little more fragile, and so we're having to change, those out as we kind of go through units and all that. So the purpose, like I said, of this is not just to show, the rainbows and unicorns side of things, but like, hey, this is what we really see, and these are some issues and things that go on. I will say that whenever we bought this asset, because they had owned it for a long time, they hadn't upgraded anything, but things were relatively in good shape, and it was being run well. I think one indication of that was their Google rating, which the asset was at a 4.3 when we purchased it. Usually that's not the case. Normally it's most people don't go onto Google to say nice things about their experiences, unfortunately. But we make a push on that, so we've been able to push. But in general, to see something at a 4.3 is pretty darn good.
Yeah, and then here's kind of the general overview of the timeline. In apartment investing, speed is super important because the quicker that you can renovate, the quicker you can drive your NOI and at the end of the day, the property value. That's the one thing that we really love about apartment investing is, there's lots of different ways to force the appreciation. And at the end of the day, you're not necessarily valued next to your neighbor like single family is. You're valued based on your NOI at that property. So the quicker you can drive that NOI, the quicker you can provide value for your investors and for yourself. So this is kind of the first 9 months into the project where we had spent quite a bit of the rehab money already. You can see it was a $3.3 million total budget. That translates to about $22,000 a door. So it's a 1993 product. It's 32 years old at this point, and these properties need quite a bit of capital to continue to renovate them. So staying well capitalized is super important. We've seen plenty of deals that went undercapitalized, and at the end of the day, everybody pays the price of that. The investors, the operators, and the residents as well, and your staff. So going in capitalized is super important. We acquired this really at the tail end of July in 2024. And then you can see there, it was really about 2 months, right at about 60 days, because again, we were at the end of July. We had actually already finished the exterior paint, so completely changed the curb appeal of the project. A month later, we had the new roof done. And then at the same time, that same month, we already had the first batch of new units coming online so that people can see and get a feel. I remember I actually toured one of the first units that were renovated, and I toured it with another resident that saw us walking around and had heard that we were upgrading units and was just super excited to see what those finish outs. So, and like Dustin mentioned, we have a lot of tenured residents, a lot of people that have been living here for a long time. So they were really excited to see, what the finished product looked like. By February, we had actually finished the clubhouse. And so that's important to note because we always plan our clubhouse renovations over the slow season. So between that November and February, that's generally your slower months in the winter when, like right now, not a whole lot's happening. Not a lot of people are moving around. We're in the holidays. And your leasing season will kind of pick up through and into the summer. And so, if you're doing a clubhouse renovation, you definitely don't want to do that in the middle of your leasing season, in the middle of summer. So, knocking that out during the slower season is super important so that the next go around, that next leasing season, you have a great first impression to show people, and they're not dealing with construction and have to work around that. These offices stay open even while you're dealing with construction. So, the logistics of that is super important. So, the more variables you can take off the table, the better experience everybody's going to have in general. Your staff and those prospects and those existing residents. So they've all got to deal with it. So planning accordingly is super important. Then we did our first pickleball court as well. We transformed that from an old basketball court and volleyball court that didn't see much use and was kind of being neglected a little bit. So we added a brand new pickleball court for people to enjoy. That's the hot new sport. So it's really cool to see, and we've actually seen tons of residents using it and enjoying it now. And then by April, we already had 35 units done. So really moving through the rehab. And this, at the end of the day, is where a great lever that you have to really force that appreciation through increasing the curb appeal, increasing those effective rents through the interior renovation program, and a great way to increase the value of the asset.
Awesome. Well, I get the fun slide. So, um, but so here's kind of our the T12. So this is the financials, and over the course of a year with this particular asset. So the T12 at takeover, the income was a little over 2.2 million. NOI was 977,000. We purchased this at 18.75 at a 5.5 cap. And then just kind of over the course of the year, as you can see, some of that was from income, but a lot of that was from the expense side. There were like I mentioned, these guys are not they weren't multifamily people. They were industrial. They'd owned it for a long time. They weren't like, oh, I just got a new loan on this. I got to do all these upgrades. I have to push rent so I can do so I can do distributions to investors and all that. So anyways, these guys, were in a just kind of a more relaxed state, and so and again, they're not multifamily people, and so they were industrial people, so they weren't trying to pull every lever to get every ounce of value out, and so their payroll was high. Their insurance, is high as well. So those are, two pretty good factors. We saw a pretty good drop on insurance just between our insurance and their insurance, but we saw an additional drop of about $60,000 after we put the new roof on. So if you just normally you don't think of, oh yeah, I'm gonna put on a new roof so I can increase the value of the property. That's just that's not normal thing. But in this particular instance, especially because the roof is older and all that, and that was that's one a pretty potential large expense for the insurance company if there's hail or storm or whatever, and there's a lot of roof damage, and so if you do $60,000, I'd have to get out my calculator real quick, but if you do 60,000 divided by 5.5 cap, that's $1 million. So just by us replacing the roof, we saw a pretty large multiple off that. So it was a few different things that kind of added up to that 49%. And then to be honest, that 12% that's while rents are frankly pretty flat around in Houston and in Dallas as well, and Austin's probably negative, but that's with flat rents too. So I think, I'm very curious to see what leasing season and all that looks like. All the data we're seeing, it should be, pretty darn attractive, kind of starting, this year and then, in years following and all that. So we should really be able to, make some headway on the income side. But anyways, but we're very really excited about this just for investors. Our raise for this was around 12 million. So you can kind of do some quick math looking here, and it's 50+% return within a year for those investors. So really excited about that. Hayden, anything else you want to mention on this slide before we head to the next?
Yeah, I just like to point out, we touched on it a little bit, but this is another reason why we really love multifamily is because you can force that appreciation with multiple different levers. So, like Dustin said, just replacing your roof is a great way to lower your insurance premium and then force the appreciation through there. And then also top line, you can increase your revenue, but you can also decrease your expenses. Both have the same effect on net operating income. So we really like that there's a lot more variables that we can control. And, like Dustin pointed out too, it's been very flat really for the past few years, all across the country, all across Houston in particular. And, we were still able to increase that top line income And that's again kind of going back to the fact that we don't like to buy the property with the highest rents on the block. So we like to see, okay, we're buying a property with effective rents at 1250. The average in the submarket is 1350, 1400. And that gives us a clear path to be able to push those rents and know that, our ceiling isn't our in-place effectives and we have room to move that. So I think this is a really good example of that really playing out in real time where, just because the broader market is experiencing either rent stagnation or declines in rents, there's still opportunities to push your income, push your rents, if that submarket can support it. Because again, real estate is hyper local. So it really comes down to that immediate submarket that you're in and what's the story of the asset, and what's the story of that area.
Yeah, and I also yeah, that's great points for sure. And yeah, it'll be interesting just to kind of see yeah, how kind of how the income side kind of develops over the next few years too, because I think that'll be pretty exciting for everybody. But one thing I wanted to just mention real quick too, it's not like I mentioned at the beginning, it's not like I guess a lot of people are like, oh, you have to put in all this money or you have to do all these things. This place must have been a dump, like blah, 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 blah. And that's not the case. Like this place, was in good shape. It was dated, but, and we'll see some pictures and all that, but like it was in good shape. They were running it well. They just didn't have to, max everything out. They didn't have to jam on the gas pedal to be able to hit their numbers and all that. So it was a nice looking asset, and we turned pulled a few levers, and we were able to fortunately get the NOI up as much as we did.
Cool. Yeah, here's a little bit of before. So again, when we see this type of look and feel, we get super excited because again, this was original to really 1993. Again, they hadn't done a whole lot. It had some weird elements to it, like this really bright blue. Just everything felt dated. A lot of the 90s and then all the way through really the mid 2000s, this beige was super popular. And so it's just very brown, very dark, and we'll see on the exterior in a couple slides. The exterior reflected that as well too. So it didn't have the best curb appeal for residents to walk into. We really like light and bright, and something that just puts you in a better mood the moment you walk through the door, rather than this, which kind of feels tired and gloomy, and really is not the best impression. So again, the property was, um, in good shape, but as you can see, it just felt dated, felt a little tired. And if we go to the after, we can see just the difference that made, from really sprucing it up. So you can see just the difference that really paint makes. Paint makes a huge difference, just brightening that up. We put this natural wood floors in to lighten up the floors. We did a custom mantle on that fireplace, so completely redid all of that. We did some trim accents throughout. You can see kind of above the mantle there. We really loved the coffered ceilings, and that was a great element with these kind of bay windows overlooking the pool. So again, going back to that character, this property had a lot of it really throughout the entire community. Um, Chopped down the island in that kitchen. That was really being used for just storage. It was kind of an afterthought of space. So we chopped down the island and then made that a great place for resident events, for kind of catering, and a much more usable, workable space for residents and employees to enjoy. Did a complete gym remodel and with all new equipment, all new fixtures in there, all new mirrors and so forth. So really did a total makeover here, and it's just so much more inviting. This clubhouse actually in 2024 was nominated for an award too, so we were super excited about that for some suburban multifamily renovation projects. So just so much more inviting. And something else to consider, and that we thought about when we were doing this clubhouse is, so this is only a 148 unit community. And so at this community, we don't actually have a model unit because, especially when you're around that 100 unit mark, every unit is about 1% of your occupancy. So here it's about 0.75%. So it's a good chunk for every single unit, and you want to maximize your income there. So the previous owner did not have a model, and we chose not to have a model here either. But we chose to instead try to bring those fixtures and features into the clubhouse so that they can visualize what their unit could look like. Um, and when they move in. And so what I mean by that is like the countertops in this kitchen are the same, the cabinets are the same, the appliances are all the same, the cabinet pulls and backsplash all the same. So all of these features, and then the wood style floor, same color, same thing with the paint. And so a lot of the finishes and fixtures and so forth that you find in this clubhouse, you'll find also in the units. And so as our staff is touring prospects through here, they can point all these things out and say, hey, this is really kind of gives you an idea of what your unit could look like. And so that's what we always try to do whenever, especially at those communities that don't have a model. You can bring that into the clubhouse and still finish it out with that kind of designer look and feel so that residents can see what their space could look like with their stuff in it, but also B, too, potentially get inspiration for if they want to take some of these elements and they like how this looks, they can bring that into theirs and they don't have to hire anybody or spend the time thinking about that either.
So here's the before on the exterior. It's nice and clean, like we mentioned before. And then one thing that, Hayden had kind of he'd mentioned, but I just wanted to point out one more time. So if you look in the bottom right hand corner, you'll see that it's almost like a I don't know a New York or Brooklyn brownstone feel to it. So it's kind of it's a pretty unique unit. I don't know if I've really seen that before. But anyways, it just has kind of a neat look and feel. Anyways, so here's the before, and because this we didn't paint the brick, and so there's a lot of obviously brick here, so it's not as big of a transformation on the interior pics for this one, but still, I think we a little upgrade look, a little cleaner, a little brighter. Obviously, the monument sign wasn't there before, so that kind of and you see that right out front. So that's a very like kind of sets the tone, we think. And like Hayden had mentioned in the slides, as far as the clubhouse and all that, I mean, that's we're very, very big on first impressions. And so obviously when you drive up, you want to give a good first impression, but they want to know, obviously, if they're not happy with the outside, they're not going inside. But once they get inside, that's their first, kind of touch point as far as like, what is my unit? What is my home going to look like, basically? And so, that clubhouse, we're very big on that really standing out, in general.
And then here is the before on the units. So again, that kind of theme of the clubhouse carried in here, even down to the blue walls. But when we see this stuff again, we get excited. White appliances, dated fixtures, dated countertops, dated flooring. This is the type of stuff that we really get excited about because it's a clean slate to come in and upgrade. And this is what 100% of the units look like, and that's key too. So. This was not one of those properties, and you'll certainly find those where every unit you go into seems to have a different look and feel, different floors, different fixtures, different brands of everything. Those are a lot harder to manage, especially again, like I had mentioned earlier, on a partial renovation. But this prior owner did a good job of keeping everything consistent, going back in with the same type of appliances, even though they were just replacing white with white. But that really helps a lot when you're going through a renovation because then everything is consistent across the board. And so this is, again, it's not a bad unit. Again, it's you can see some of the elements of the character in the kitchen and the fireplace and so forth. So we liked the bones of it, but it was just dated. It was just tired and really ready for an update. So then we can go and see the after. So again, like I had mentioned about the clubhouse, you can kind of see it almost looks the same, especially in the kitchen. Same countertops, same fixtures, same appliances, same style flooring. So it had a very similar look and feel to the clubhouse. So again, sometimes some people have a hard time visualizing what is this going to look like after I put my stuff in here, or how to utilize these spaces. And so by being able to show them what it looks like, even without a model in our clubhouse, that really helps our leasing consultants sell the product when they're touring prospects through here. And in our occupancy really has been super stable at this asset, even since we've owned it. So, that is probably only one element of why, but we just really liked the fact that keeping everything consistent across the board makes everything so much more efficient. And then on top of that, we had actually pre-negotiated, and we'll show a little bit of detail, but we pre-negotiated the scope of work for every single floor plan at the community with our general contractor beforehand. So while we were under contract with this deal, and again, that kind of goes back to the timeline, and that enables you to really streamline the process and minimize those change orders. Like Dustin talked about, there's inevitably some things that you're going to stumble upon that you didn't account for, and that contingency capital, that those extra reserves really come in handy for those things. But the more you can do to minimize that is super important. And then having those predetermined bids per floor plan for the scope of work that you're looking for makes things really, really efficient. Not only during the renovation process, but also the invoicing process, and the payment process and so forth. It makes it a lot easier, and that preserves that relationship between you and your vendors.
And then, no one's perfect. We're all human. So, and these are really big projects. I mean, like Hayden mentioned earlier, we're spending over $3 million on, 150 units. I mean, it's a lot going on. And so, but what, we really appreciate, with our contractor is just making it right. And so kind of top left hand corner, you see the usually you don't want that. I don't know if it's utility box or whatever you call it, but cable, we'll just call it the cable box. You generally don't want the cable box to stand out. You generally want that to be kind of blending in, or like you don't want it to be seen. It's not like a focal point. Hopefully, if it is focal point, then might be some other issues. But so, anyways, but this is a bright green, and so obviously we don't want we want it to blend in. We don't want that to be a focal point. So we changed color from that kind of bright green to more muted, so it blends in with the background and the bushes and all that stuff. And then, it's this picture kind of going from the bright green down to the blue ceiling. Those I've personally in my personal residence before. I've had an older home where we try to do coffered ceilings, and they're tough, honestly. So we had a lot of just difficulty there, just trying to make sure it looked good and it looked right. And then the going down further to the next picture, we found out that so where the mirrors are, we found out the walls are not straight, and so you could actually, I believe, get your hand in behind the mirror and all that. And we were concerned, like, what if a kid goes in there and pulls or whatever, the mirror falls on and blah blah blah. So anyways, we had all that corrected as well. But like, you get into a construction project, and you got to pivot a little bit, and that's just kind of that's how these go. And then Hayden, if you want to kind of mention, trying to recall the whole story on the pavement right there.
Yeah, so that was actually a lender requirement that we had to do. We had to expand that handicap space to a certain width, and then it had to have access to a ramp that was connected. So we actually had to pour that entire ramp, and you can kind of see just the waviness in there, and especially with these larger properties, these larger projects, a lot of times it's easy to overlook that stuff and just say it's good enough, right? But the problem is that if you bring that mentality to your contractors, to your staff, it has this ripple effect, and then everybody has that headset. And so when we saw this, we immediately thought, no, we gotta redo this. It needs to be flat. It needs to be level. You're gonna get water that pools there. You're gonna get erosion problems, and then it's gonna, look terrible that really, really fast. So it's going to be a waste of money. And then at the same time, it's going to, instill that mindset into people that we work with and people on the property. And so that was kind of an example of the just attention to detail that you have to have. Another example is like anytime we do a full repaint on an exterior, we walk every single building, every single unit. We call out the smallest drips of paint, and you really need to do that when you're working on these properties. It's easy. It's not like it's your primary residence or anything like that. So it's really easy to get in that headset. I felt myself wanting to do that sometimes too, and I have to convince myself to say, no, we have to hold ourselves to the highest standard here. And anytime you see something, even the smallest thing that needs attention, you have to correct it. Because if I notice it, if you notice it, a resident's going to notice it, and that's what's most important. And then just talking on ways to speed things up. So we touched on this a little bit, but again, this is super important to being able to actually implement your business plan, drive NOI at the end of the day, and increase the property value. So having a dedicated contractor, that's something that we really like. Finding a contractor and developing a relationship with them to be able to work efficiently, to be able to handle everything you need, and kind of have a dedicated point of contact is super helpful on these large scale projects. We work with a guy named Ruben Ortiz. He owns Sane Construction out of Dallas, and he does a fantastic job on large scale multifamily projects. Renovate all the units. So a lot of times you hear the saying, want to leave some meat on the bone. I mean, we say it sometimes too. But at the end of the day, renovating all of the units is going to make your implementation of that business plan so much easier. Because if you only have a portion of them planned, it can make things really challenging. Even for example, like for instance, if maybe you plan on renovating half of them and only half of each floor plan. But if that doesn't get communicated on a routine basis to your on-site staff, they may forget, or if you have turnover and you don't re-communicate that with the staff, they may forget, and the next time a unit comes up uh, available to either make ready or upgrade, they may designate that as an upgrade when it should have been a make ready. And that right there can skew your entire business plan. So renovating all the units really takes the guesswork out of it and makes it much, much easier. You can do different levels of finish outs. Like at this property, we don't have the whole tech package and some of the higher end fixtures. I've seen even waterfall countertops and some kitchens that are really cool. So you can always take it to a next level too, but doing a consistent scope of work across the board makes things much, much easier during DD. So do all during your due diligence, that is your opportunity to get all your trade bids. So go out to all your different vendors, make sure you have those bids in hand. That's where you can agree upon those prices. You can lock it in ahead of time. And then once you're going through, it makes things really, really easy. You already know what your prices are going to be. It just streamlines everything and it takes away the guesswork and some of those surprises, which nobody likes at the end of the day. Check on things like HOA approvals. It's super important, or permitting. A lot of signage requires a lot of permitting. HOA, if you're in an HOA, we have a property that's actually in an HOA. This one specifically is not, but we have another across town that is. You got to get their approval. So, what colors that you plan on using? make sure you get their approval because what happens if they deny it and you've already spent the money on it? Then you're going to have to pay for it twice. So those things are super important. So always look out for those. And then buying in bulk, again, kind of goes back to, locking everything in ahead of time. But anything you can do to cut down costs and then also just streamline the process in general. All of these little things help. These seem like kind of common sense at the end of the day, but again, the implementation is the hard part, and having those relationships with the vendors and so forth. So even before you get the first project, I always recommend like go talk to management companies, go talk to different vendors, take them out to lunch, see their operations, go to their headquarters, see one of their projects. Like asked to do all of these things because that's going to become very, very important when you get that deal and you want to know how everybody works. And so the more you can understand that, the better your project's going to go.
Yeah, and then Hayden had touched on this a few times, just in terms of making sure all the paint looks good and so on and so forth. But yeah, there's a lot of planning that goes in on the front end. You can kind of see here, like we have there's different type of paint for the wall and the ceiling and so anyways it's just being detailed and having that kind of in place up front just saves a ton of time. I mean, there's the old saying, I don't know, I'm gonna butcher this, I'm terrible at these, but measure three times, cut once type thing. And so just instead of just putting stuff together and kind of hoping it works out and all that. And one thing that's kind of nice, so this asset was our seventh asset in Houston. So we've been able to refine things over time, which obviously helps. We have a pretty darn good system in place, and so really we're just right now we're at a rinse and repeat mode. That's kind of where we're at.
And then here's something I think oftentimes actually gets overlooked a lot is that web presence, and it's super important. I can't tell you how many times I've been on apartments.com or websites and I see errors or iPhone photos on there, or their floor plans aren't showing up and they don't have the 3D floor plans. You see it all. And these are really, really easy things, low cost items that make a big impression. So much of what we do nowadays is online and digital. And so having a good web presence is really, really important. Getting a photographer out there to shoot professional photos, that's well worth the cost. And generally, that's only a couple $100. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that much for these large properties, and it is, should be 100%, something that you do. And then on top of that, like, there's a lot of research into how people buy and what people care about too. So, like, for example, for home shopping, people care about the kitchens and bathrooms and bedrooms, so showing those first on your layout. I've seen a lot of properties where, it kind of bounces back and forth. They haven't even thought through the order of their photos on their online presence. And you see a kitchen photo and then a clubhouse photo and then a pool photo and then a bathroom photo. And it's just all over the place. And, that's the experience that you're giving for prospects. And, all of those things add up and matter at the end of the day. So showing them those areas that they care about, that they use the most first, and kind of walking them through the experience that you'd have at the property is super important. Because for us, at least, we always believe like, people are going to correlate that experience. And we've all heard the saying, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I think a lot of people, that's in the back of their minds, and it affects their decision-making process at the end of the day. So, taking care of these little details, whether it's online or in person, they both are equally important.
Then we've we've talked about reviews. Fortunately, like I mentioned, most of the time when we've purchased assets, the Google reviews have not been at this rating. Normally, they've been honestly kind of like low threes or so. So this was refreshing for us, which was great. But like I mentioned too, not all reviews are, normally people are like, oh, wow, I can't wait to go to Google and tell them how much I enjoyed the service and all that. Usually it's, something you can see here, the very first sentence, I'm very disappointed with this complex. This was, we were replacing the roof. Like it's going to be loud, and we do the best we can, and our contractor does the best they can, just in terms of, there's debris and there's cleanup and all that, but you can do everything in the world, and we send out notices and all this other stuff. We try to be, respectful as far as times. Like obviously, we're not going too early or too late or anything like that. But it's hard to please everybody, and probably impossible to please everybody. But we do the best we can, and just try to be as responsive and kind of that planning ahead helps quite a bit as well.
And then going back to just training, again, a big part, if you guys can't tell already, but a big part of our philosophy is making everything systematic and programmatic. We really like the kind of franchise model, and that's what we've kind of adopted for apartment investing as well. So we want to make things repeatable. And by clustering assets close by, there's been so many times I can't even count how many times, well, somebody's been sick or somebody's going on vacation, and you need to pull staff from one of your other communities and get help. And so the more repeatable everything is, and the more you train your teams, the easier those transitions are. And so we train everybody the same. This is an example of one of the SharePoint sites that we created for the Henry at Ranchstone, and then they have all of these SOPs and documents and training videos and so forth that they have access to. And we have the same for every single one of the sites. So they're all set up the same as well. So all of our team members are getting trained the same way. And we've really kind of developed this mentality on our management side that we want to help each other. We want to collaborate as much as we can. And we want all of our managers to work together, all of our maintenance personnel to work together. And we want them to be willing to lend a helping hand whenever it's needed, because there's going to be a time where it definitely is. And so training your teams is super important. That's where kind of we really like having that brand, because then you don't have to change uniforms and do all of that and relearn. Okay, what property do I have to learn about today? So it makes onboarding a lot easier. And then as well, just reputation in the market too helps a ton from that perspective as well. We've recently, over the past week, we've been on two different interviews for staff members that we're bringing on. One's a manager and one's a regional. And, they've heard about the Henrys. They've heard about them in the marketplace, and they're excited to be a part of the organization and to continue to grow the reputation of the brand. So people get excited about that. They want to be a part of that. So showing you care and, paying attention to these little details, and then having that brand people can get behind, we've seen, at least for us, that people are really excited about.
And then I know we're about to wrap up here, so we'll be quick. But in general, I guess huge, all the Texas markets have seen a huge amount of supply. That supply, especially in Houston, is really falling off a cliff right now, and so we're really excited, about 26 and the opportunities that are available. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, there's a lot of deal. It's very, very, my our personal opinion, very attractive right now. There's a lot of deals. unfortunately that are being foreclosed on or kind of pre-foreclosure, and so there's a lot of interesting opportunities, and I think it has been very tough, honestly, the past few years, and so I think we're seeing kind of turning the corner right now. Insurance premiums are down, property taxes are coming down too. So I think there's a lot of pun intended, a lot of momentum, heading into 2026 that we're really excited about. And then before we kind of wrap up real quick, we have a DD checklist if you want to check it out. We do have Jessica, if you would mind posting in the chat. We do have a webinar tomorrow as well, about our income fund, that just kind of going over the performance of that over the last 12 months. We'll have some other events kind of coming up. We have a bunch of different events coming up in 2026 that we're really excited about. I think there's going to be a lot of really just good opportunities in general. I did see a question in the chat. Someone asked if we were going to do a property tour. John, if reach out to us if you're in Houston. We're happy to meet you at the property. But we may end up doing. We don't have anything on the books, but we may end up doing a property tour of one of these assets next year as well. So, I really just appreciate you guys coming on. I don't know if you guys had any questions or anything we can help with, but just appreciate you guys being on. And, always happy to chat, about multifamily. And we're, like I mentioned, we're not to be salesy or whatever, but, I think 2026 is going to be very, very interesting. We're seeing a lot of interesting opportunities. About half of the deals that have been going under contract actually close. If that just kind of shows you an indication of what the market looks like right now. So we're really excited about it. There's some the sellers are getting very creative right now with seller financing. We're looking at potential taking over. We've looked at a few of them, but there's one deal we're looking at potentially taking over. The lender and equities kind of in control there. So we're seeing some really, really interesting opportunities, and we're just focused on Houston and Dallas. So yeah, appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys. And Hayden, I don't know if there's anything else you want to end with before we call it a day.
Yeah, no, just would echo that. I appreciate everybody hopping on. Yeah, if you guys want to scan that, you're welcome to download a free DD checklist. It's got just some general high level overview stuff to be aware of. And then, yeah, if anybody's in Houston, reach out to us. I'm a local here in Houston. Happy to grab lunch or coffee, do a property tour if you guys want. Happy to meet you guys out there. Sam, I just saw your question. So this one already closed. This one's not available for investment at this point, but this is very typical of the type of asset and business plan that we roll out. So I'd highly recommend going to our website and joining on our investor database too, if you guys aren't already in there, because it's very programmatic. It's very rinse and repeat. Like Dustin shared at the front of the presentation, a lot of our assets look and feel the same. That's because we're implementing the same business plan here. So definitely, I'd get on that list if you aren't, so that you can see future opportunities. And again, if anybody's here in Houston, happy to be a resource for you as well.
I just wanted to mention too on Sam's questions. So our typical minimum, I guess for any deal really is usually 50K. That particular deal was a 5.6B. We've done mainly 5.6Bs. We've also done like the fund that we're talking about tomorrow is a 5.6C. So and we closed that August of last year, so it's been closed for a bit. But just wanted to give more of a case study and more of a kind of teaching moment and all that. So, anyways, yeah, appreciate everyone. Hope you guys have a great Wednesday. Enjoy the holidays, enjoy time with your family. Thank you, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.
Yes.